A warm greeting to all our beloved audience and listeners of the Amazing Stories channel. Dear viewers, in today's familiar broadcast slot, we invite you to dive into the story we are about to share. We wish you moments of joy and relaxation as you listen to this tale. In the fleeting moments of life, we often find ourselves grappling with profound questions about love, choices, and the person we aspire to become. Under the fading moonlight is a story about the deep-seated conflicts within individuals who seem to have it all but lack understanding and connection. It revolves around the intricate relationship between Ethan and Violet, where genuine emotions are torn between the decisions of the heart and the mind. In moments of weakness, people are often tempted to lose themselves in uncontrollable emotions. Yet, it is precisely during these times that they discover valuable lessons about themselves and those they love. My life with Violet after marriage could be described as peaceful, but full of surprises and excitement. Together, we built our home and embarked on a happy journey, though it came with its own challenges. Violet is a wonderful wife, not only beautiful, but also highly talented. She works as a chef at a renowned restaurant, while I, a human resources manager, always feel fortunate to have her by my side. We were in love for more than 5 years before deciding to marry, a time that allowed us to truly understand each other, not just in work but in the small details of life. Violet is gentle yet decisive in everything she does. She has a way of adding excitement to our married life, and I feel lucky to share every moment with her. A few months before our wedding, we decided to visit Violet's family. Her hometown may be small, but it has a serene and poetic beauty. The scattered old houses, each adorned with lush, green trees, created a soothing and peaceful ambience. Violet was very proud of her hometown, telling me countless stories about her childhood, the trees she loved, and the cherished memories with her family and friends. One evening, after dinner, the family decided to attend a festival. The mystical glow of lanterns hanging along the streets, combined with the chilly evening air, created an atmosphere that was both enchanting and intimate. She held my hand as we strolled through familiar paths, showing me the trees she had nurtured and sharing memories tied to each one. When we arrived at the village fair, bustling with people, I felt a vibrant and warm energy. Cultural activities were in full swing, with everyone laughing and enjoying themselves. Violet, with her deep knowledge of village traditions, shared many fascinating insights with me. I listened intently, feeling like I was not only learning about her family, but also gaining a deeper understanding of her, the woman I love. At that moment, a young girl approached us. She was the daughter of Aunt Grace, a relative of Violet's family. Cheerful and quick to introduce herself, she was a lively and bright final-year university student. She invited us to visit Aunt Grace's house, and we gladly accepted. When we arrived at Aunt Grace's cozy home, we were greeted warmly. Aunt Grace treated us to sweet, homemade drinks and shared humorous anecdotes from the past. Despite her age, Aunt Grace was full of energy and youthful spirit, creating a unique connection that made me feel an even stronger bond with Violet's family. As we were preparing to leave, I asked Violet about Aunt Grace. She smiled and said, "My aunt is a very strong woman. Though she got married quite early, she has always maintained excellent health and a positive spirit. Aunt Grace is not only skilled at taking care of her family, but is also highly energetic, which allows her to keep her youthful and vibrant appearance." Hearing her story about Aunt Grace made me admire this woman even more, and I felt grateful for the tales that helped me understand my wife better and the people who shaped her family. Visiting Violet's family was not just an opportunity to learn about her hometown and family, but also a chance to witness the resilience and warmth of the women in her family. Violet is not just my wife, but also a great source of inspiration, a person who helps me see the beauty and value in this life. Our life together might not be perfect, but it's the simple things like this that make me cherish the moments I share with her even more. After dinner, the cozy atmosphere lingered, infused with the flavors of the homely meal. I stayed back a little longer to chat with her family. Lily, Violet's younger sister, though still young, was preparing to face a major milestone in her life, the university graduation exams. Cheerful and full of energy, she was always the one to spark laughter in the family. Meanwhile, Violet's little brother, was only in third grade, but often had us bursting into laughter with his mischievous antics and boundless energy. Violet reminisced about her childhood, recalling family gatherings and festive outings in their hometown. As she spoke, I couldn't help but feel the deep bond in her family. Those little stories seemed to be an inseparable part of her life, and through them, I felt immersed in their world, filled with love and warmth. The next morning was clear and refreshing. I woke up early, not because there was anything urgent, but simply because I felt an unusual sense of peace. Violet, hi, and I headed to the kitchen to prepare a meal for the extended family. Everything was done leisurely, with love and cooperation, from cooking to setting up offerings. The air in the house was filled with love and sharing, an image I always hoped to have. Aunt Grace, Violet's mother's younger sister, joined us for the meal. Aunt Grace was a woman with a remarkable vitality. Though she was over 50, her youthful and energetic demeanor was something everyone admired. She owned a large bonsai garden, and during our conversation, I could feel her passion for her work. She shared that caring for the plants was no easy task, but she always felt fulfilled doing what she loved. Her words left me in awe of her perseverance and dedication. The meal was warm and joyful. Everyone shared stories about work, dreams, and old memories. I couldn't help but feel incredibly lucky to be sitting there, sharing these simple, yet meaningful moments with Violet's family. After the meal, I went for a walk in the garden with Liam, Aunt Grace's son. Liam was an adorable, lively, and curious boy. We stopped in front of a large bonsai tree, and I shared a few tips with him on how to care for the plants. Although he was young, I could see his eagerness to learn and his enthusiastic spirit. Liam asked me many questions about bonsai and how to keep them healthy. I tried to explain as simply as I could. In doing so, I realized that such small, simple things could create special bonds. As the sunset bathed the garden in golden light, Violet gently reminded me that it was time to leave. Liam, with innocent eyes, tugged at my hand and said, "Can you stay and play with me a little longer?" Violet smiled, but in Liam's eyes, I saw a hint of sadness. I couldn't bear to leave right away, so I decided to stay a bit longer and talk with him some more. Finally, when everyone had dispersed and the house fell into quiet stillness, I lay on the bed, gazing at the ceiling, reflecting on everything that had happened during the day. Liam had fallen into a deep sleep, and Violet had returned to her room to rest. I couldn't sleep right away. My heart was still filled with the warmth of this family gathering. It had been so long since I had felt this kind of peace. Violet's family, with their heartfelt conversations and simple memories, gave me a sense of belonging, as if they were an inseparable part of my life. Everything passed gently until one evening after dinner. The atmosphere in the house became unusually serene. Violet and I quietly cleaned up, while the soft hum of laughter and conversation drifted from the living room, where her family was chatting. They discussed work in the garden, small plans for the future, and shared everyday stories. Aunt Grace, the resilient woman in the family, always caught my attention. Despite being in her middle age, she maintained a youthful and gentle appearance, a perfect blend of strength and femininity. At times, I felt that her gaze carried more than just everyday care. It seemed to hold a story that I had yet to uncover. One night, when everyone was fast asleep, I found myself unable to rest. My mind swirled with endless thoughts about life, family, and the relationships within it. In the stillness of the house, I suddenly heard soft footsteps in the hallway. Curious, I got up and quietly peeked through the door. Aunt Grace was walking past my room. Her steps seemed hesitant, as if weighed down by some concern. She paused, turned her head slowly, and looked toward me, her eyes filled with a mix of contemplation and hesitation. For a moment, I didn't know if I should speak, but finally I asked, "Is everything all right, Aunt Grace?" She remained silent for a moment, then sighed, her eyes heavy with thought. Sometimes, she began, we feel like we're being swept away by life, unable to hold on, especially when it involves leaving behind those we love. Her words made me realize that her thoughts weren't easy for her to share. Aunt Grace had always been a strong woman, but tonight, it seemed as if everything felt heavier for her. I sensed loneliness in her words, even though she didn't say it outright. I smiled gently, trying to ease the atmosphere. Life can be like that at times, but you're never alone. Everyone is here for you. You know that, don't you? Aunt Grace looked at me with a deep, thoughtful gaze before a faint smile crossed her lips. It felt as though the heaviness in the air had lifted slightly. She then turned and returned to her room, but the strange feeling in my heart lingered. The next morning, I woke early. Outside, Liam, Aunt Grace's son, was happily playing, his laughter echoing through the space, bringing a fresh energy to the house. Everyone began the new day, and no one mentioned the events of the previous night. Yet, I knew that each person carried their own thoughts, things unspoken but still present in their hearts. Even so, life went on, and each day brought new lessons. In those quiet moments, I realized something important. Understanding, patience, and love for the people we hold dear matter deeply, even when we can't fully grasp what they're going through. After a day filled with laughter and joy, Violet and I, along with her family, returned to the small house, a place where love and kinship awaited. That evening, the atmosphere felt unusual yet warm and gentle, almost magical. It was just a simple family gathering, yet everything seemed to be wrapped in a delicate veil of affection and tenderness, a feeling that lingered long into the night. Violet, with her beauty akin to moonlight, always makes me feel that every moment spent with her is priceless. I can't help but notice the smallest details. The way her eyes look at me, how she laughs freely, and her seemingly casual gestures that carry profound meaning. Lily, Violet's younger sister, is a source of endless joy. She has the ability to bring any space to life, whether through her humorous family stories or her innocent yet curious questions. The family was laughing and chatting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was witnessing a living portrait of close-knit relationships, simple yet priceless moments. I sat quietly, my eyes never leaving Violet. Even as the conversation continued, I couldn't ignore the deep connection between us. The fleeting glances, the silent smiles we exchanged, all of it spoke of a love that needed no words. It was something intangible, yet so clear. As the evening wound down and everyone began to disperse, Violet and I stayed behind. We didn't need to say anything. We just sat together, letting the quietness envelop us. Yet, within that silence was a profound understanding, the kind of feeling that makes you realize that simply being together is enough. As night fell, a gentle breeze wafted in through the window. Violet looked at me, her smile lingering, but her eyes carried a contemplative expression, as if she wanted to say something. We decided to step outside for some quiet time where no one would disturb us. The streets were deserted, bathed in the golden glow of streetlights that cast long shadows on the ground. In that moment, everything seemed to radiate a mysterious, dreamlike beauty. We didn't say much, just walked side by side, savoring each slow step under the warm streetlights. Without the need for words, I knew these were the moments that truly mattered, the silent yet affectionate moments that required no explanation. Simply being together was enough. Later, we visited a few of Violet's relatives nearby, taking the opportunity before returning to work. On our way back, we decided to stop at a roadside cafe after a long day of traveling. The surrounding scenery was peaceful, with a gentle breeze cooling the oppressive heat of the afternoon. Violet leaned back into a wooden chair, her eyes showing a hint of weariness. But when she looked at me, she smiled softly, as if nothing could trouble her. "Are you okay?" I asked gently, watching her closely. She tilted her head slightly, her gaze still sweet but tinged with fatigue. "I'm just a little tired from the long day, but it's nothing." "Don't worry," she replied, her voice light, as if trying to reassure me despite her own exhaustion. We continued driving through quiet roads lined with simple houses, and in the distance, vast rice fields stretched out under the dimming light. Night began to fall, and the faint glimmer of stars made the surroundings feel serene, yet strangely unfamiliar. Even so, I couldn't ignore the tension in Violet's eyes. It was as if something was unsettling her. She had always been this way, worrying about everything, even the smallest of things. When we finally arrived home, I saw Liam, Aunt Grace's son, sitting on the steps, gazing outside with a melancholy expression. He wasn't asleep as early as usual. When he saw us return, he quickly stood up, beaming. "You're back. I was starting to think you were gone too long," Liam exclaimed, his cheerful voice a breath of fresh air. I gently patted his head and smiled. "Yes, we're back now. What are you doing out here?" Liam looked down a bit shy. "I was just waiting. Mom said you were gone for too long, and I got worried," he replied quietly. Violet turned to me with a faint smile. She always teased me about being too indulgent, but I knew Liam just wanted someone to talk to. "Go to sleep, okay? You have to wake up early tomorrow," I said gently. Liam nodded but hesitated, glancing at us one last time before heading inside. Violet looked at me, her eyes filled with emotion she couldn't put into words. She seemed tired, but I knew it wasn't just because of today's work. When everyone had gone inside, I felt there was something unresolved lingering in the air. I decided to step out to the veranda, where Aunt Grace was sitting alone, gently fanning herself in the quiet night. She looked up at me and smiled softly. "Come sit here in the cool air. It's too warm inside," she said, her voice as light as a passing breeze. I approached and sat down beside her. The atmosphere carried an inexplicable sense of peace. We sat in silence, gazing at the star-filled sky and soaking in the stillness of the world around us. "How are you? Are you tired?" Aunt Grace asked gently, her voice laced with quiet concern. I sighed lightly, feeling a weariness not just of the body, but of the worries weighing on my heart. "I'm okay, but today, there's something that feels unsettled, like there's something I can't fully understand," I replied. Aunt Grace smiled, but it wasn't a smile of mere politeness. It was one of reassurance. "Life has its mysteries, child, but sometimes all we need to do is take a deep breath and trust that things will work out. The important thing is to keep peace in your heart." Her words felt like a gentle melody, soothing the worries clouding my mind. I looked at Aunt Grace, no longer seeing her just as Violet's aunt, but as a strong woman full of empathy and understanding. "Sometimes I feel like everything is so vague," I said quietly. "I don't know what I'm searching for, but there's this strange feeling inside me." I sighed again. Aunt Grace gently patted my shoulder, her smile like a quiet blessing. "Don't worry. Everything will become clear. What's important is that you always keep faith in yourself." The late-night breeze drifted by, carrying with it a sense of calm. For a moment, the worries in my heart paused. Violet, having gone inside earlier, came out and softly touched my hand. "I feel better now," she whispered. I looked at her, seeing a hint of worry in her eyes, but also hope. "I believe we'll overcome any difficulties, no matter what. As long as we have each other," I replied. Moments like these, though simple, are the most precious in life. Life may throw challenges our way, but with Violet I always have her by my side, and that's all I need. That evening, under the pale moonlight, the night seemed like a thick curtain surrounding us. The space carried only the faint rustling of the wind, bringing with it the scent of grass and the unique stillness of the night. I sat on a wicker chair on the veranda, looking up at the vast sky, while Aunt Grace sat beside me. The air between us was unusually quiet, and our conversation was light, punctuated only by occasional soft laughter. But I sensed something different in Aunt Grace's gaze, a complexity I couldn't quite put into words. She had lived long enough to understand that life wasn't just what it appeared to be. Yet there were moments when it felt like she was hiding something within her. "What do you think about the decisions you've made in life so far?" Aunt Grace asked. Her question was gentle, but cast a shadow over the space around us. I pressed my lips together, not rushing to answer. Life is full of choices, and no one is immune to making mistakes. Every decision, every step can change everything forever. Sometimes I wonder if those choices were the right ones. I said finally, my voice dropping as if no answer could ever feel sufficient. But they can't be changed anymore, can they, Aunt Grace? Aunt Grace didn't reply immediately. She sat quietly, her gaze distant, fixed on the faraway stars. At last, she smiled, a light, comforting smile filled with a sense of understanding and solace. Youth is a time of mistakes, but also a time to learn. The important thing is not to let worries linger for too long. You still have many opportunities. Don't let yourself be haunted by the past. Aunt Grace's words, though simple, felt like a soothing breeze sweeping through my heart. Sometimes, just hearing such gentle advice can bring me a sense of relief. However, not everything troubling me could be resolved with just encouraging words. That vague feeling, the unanswered questions, still lingered in my mind. After a while, Aunt Grace stood up and stretched, then turned to me. The faint moonlight reflecting on her face suddenly made me sense the resilience within her. You should head to bed. There's much to do tomorrow. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it later, she said softly, an unspoken end to our conversation for the night. I nodded, feeling no need to say more. We understood each other without needing many words. My relationship with Aunt Grace didn't require grand expressions. Sometimes, just a look, a smile, or a quiet remark was enough to convey understanding. When I went inside, I saw that Liam was fast asleep, his face serene and innocent. Looking at him, I felt a peace that I had been searching for all day. Tonight, I may not have found answers to all the questions in my heart, but at least I could let things drift away and sleep. Tomorrow would bring a new day, and perhaps small decisions would guide me toward the next step. The next morning, I took Lily to town to buy some necessities. As we walked along the quiet road, we chatted, and the atmosphere felt light and relaxed. She seemed excited about the items I had helped her choose, her face glowing with happiness as she looked at the boxes of cosmetics in her hands. At the checkout counter, she turned to me, her eyes bright and her smile radiant. Ethan, you're so thoughtful. Thank you so much. I really love these gifts, she said warmly. I simply nodded with a gentle smile. I only helped you pick them. You're the one who knows what you need. Holding her bags, Lily smiled contentedly. As we stepped out of the store, she suddenly grabbed my hand, her expression suggesting she had something on her mind. It's so hot today. Let's go somewhere for a drink, she said, her voice and gaze light and easy. Although I felt happy about her attention, a part of me remained cautious. Our relationship was purely sibling-like, nothing more. She was always sweet and endearing, but I knew we needed to maintain a certain boundary. Let's go, but remember not to rush into anything, I replied softly, emphasizing the importance of clear boundaries between closeness and respect. Lily looked a little surprised but quickly smiled, as if she understood what I meant. You're always overthinking, An. I just want to grab a drink, she said, shaking her head before walking ahead. I followed, feeling a sense of relief that everything remained under control. On the way, she shared stories about her classes, her friends, and the little things that brought her joy. These stories made me forget the scorching summer heat, and time seemed to slow down, drifting gently. At the cafe, I ordered a refreshing glass of orange juice while Lily, sitting across from me, continued smiling as if life's worries couldn't touch her. I really like this place, she said, her eyes lighting up as she looked around. Thank you for bringing me here. I replied simply, enough for her to understand my sentiment. It's nothing, just a small thing. We continued chatting about random things, letting the time pass by with ease. I could clearly sense that, despite a slight awkwardness, there was still an air of comfort and mutual respect between us. The relationship between Luffy and me always maintained a certain distance, and perhaps it was precisely this distance that allowed it to remain enduring and stable. Even so, I couldn't help but appreciate the respect she showed me, hoping that we could always maintain the necessary boundaries to preserve the purity of our connection. After finishing our drinks, Luffy and I left the cafe to head back. Suddenly, a storm broke out, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. We couldn't find shelter in time, so both of us ended up soaked to the bone. With no other choice, we sought temporary refuge to dry off and avoid catching a cold, waiting for the rain to subside before continuing home. Unfortunately, the inn we found only had one single bed available. Caught in a moment of awkwardness, I told Luffy to take a shower first to avoid getting cold, and that I would go after her since I was a man. When Luffy emerged from the bathroom, her face was glowing, just as fresh as it had been before. She stood in front of the mirror in the room, her long hair cascading down after the shower. She smiled when she saw me, her eyes sparkling with contentment. But I couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. Go shower, I'll call Vi, she said softly, her tone light, yet holding a subtle hint of something I couldn't quite grasp. She seemed perfectly at ease, but I couldn't bring myself to feel the same way. A sense of conflict stirred within me, torn between attraction and the desire to maintain boundaries. I nodded, trying my best to conceal my uneasiness, and went to the bathroom. The cool water washed over me, easing the summer heat on my body, but my mind kept returning to what had just happened. That feeling, the closeness with Luffy, was something I couldn't entirely control. When I stepped out, wearing a light shirt and long pants, I saw Luffy still sitting there, her gaze fixed on me, unflinching. She didn't say anything, only offering a faint smile, but I could see in her eyes that I was someone she paid close attention to. Do you think you'll lose control? Luffy suddenly asked, catching me off guard. She looked at me seriously, a stark contrast to her usual playful demeanor. At that moment, I saw a maturity in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. Sitting down beside her, I replied gently, sometimes it's not about control. It's about understanding what you truly feel. I don't want to hurt anyone, and I certainly don't want to hurt you, Luffy. Luffy looked at me for a long time without speaking, her eyes searching, not for an answer to her question, but for something much deeper. She wanted to know if we could continue this relationship without anyone getting hurt. She wanted to understand whether this closeness was genuine affection or just something difficult to control. I understand, she said at last, her voice softer now, as if she had found a bit of peace within herself. Things can change, but I want you to know that I genuinely care for you. I don't want to make things more complicated. I nodded, letting out a sigh. This relationship between us wasn't as simple as it seemed. It was filled with questions and doubts, yet also with undeniable emotions and desires. We'll be okay, I said softly, patting her shoulder and trying to regain my composure. Time passed, and the rain finally stopped. By the time Luffy and I got back home, it was already dark. The atmosphere in the house felt lighter, but I could sense a subtle tension in every step I took. As everyone began preparing dinner, I returned to the rhythm of daily life. Yet, deep inside, I couldn't shake the lingering feeling of discomfort. Violet stepped out of her room, looked at me, and asked, "Where are you rushing off to? Aren't you staying for dinner?" I smiled, trying to appear calm. "I just had something to take care of with Luffy, but it's done now. I'll join everyone for dinner." Violet didn't say anything more, just nodded gently and went into the kitchen. I sat quietly, listening to the laughter and chatter of the others. But inside, I couldn't shake the swirl of mixed emotions. When dinner was ready, everyone gathered around. Outside, the rain began to pour heavily, enveloping the space in a tranquil stillness. Violet's father spoke up. "With this rain, it'd be a great time to catch some fish. Ethan, want to come along with me and your uncle?" I nodded, not particularly excited, but unwilling to decline. The three of us donned raincoats and hats before stepping out. The sound of the rain pouring down created a strangely warm atmosphere. Even with the stormy weather, the peace I felt amidst the rain reminded me that sometimes what we need isn't quick decisions, but serenity in our hearts. After cooling off under the rain, I continued helping with the fishing. This time, I joined Violet's father in setting nets. The scenery was beautiful. The rain had just stopped, leaving the air cool and refreshing. Fat rice-field fish swam out freely, almost as if welcoming us. As someone who grew up in the city, I could hardly believe I was managing this type of work. But with a bit of experience from childhood visits to the countryside, I handled it decently. Violet's father caught a few large water snakes, while Uncle Grace managed to snag plenty of eels and catfish. It was truly a day filled with a bounty of rewards. The cool air and the sound of laughter made me feel an unusual joy in these moments. From a distance, Violet stood watching, her smile filled with a hint of mischief. "Bet you didn't think you'd catch this much, huh? Ethan, you've surprised me," she teased. I laughed, replying, "If I hadn't slipped earlier, I'd have caught even more." Her father chuckled, patting my shoulder. "Good work, son. You did well," he praised. Violet blushed, lowering her head before rushing inside, while I could only smile to myself. The family prepared dinner with what we'd caught. The meal featured a fragrant and sweet green banana soup, complemented by other dishes. Violet didn't forget to bring out a bottle of snake-infused wine that Aunt Grace had prepared earlier. Everyone sat down, enjoying the warm atmosphere. When the wine was poured, people praised its flavor, and I couldn't help but feel slightly tipsy after. A while, lying down to rest, I drifted into a deep sleep as the rain stopped, leaving the air cool and fresh. When I woke the next morning, Violet was already prepared for our trip back to the city. "Wake up. Everything's ready. Let's head back now," she said gently. I got up and quickly got ready. Violet had packed everything beforehand. I said my goodbyes to her family before getting in the car with her, leaving the peaceful countryside to begin a new journey. When we arrived, we headed to our lodging. Though the space wasn't large, it was airy and offered a sense of tranquility with its view of a nearby lake. I smiled, holding the bottle of wine her father had given me. It felt like a piece of the serene days we'd left behind was still with me, though not everything was simple. "Try the wine. Tell me what you think," Violet said, smiling as she handed me a glass. She had a way of making everything seem effortless, as if there were no need to rush or worry about anything. Looking into her eyes, I felt a mix of familiarity and mystery. "Let me try," I said, raising an eyebrow playfully. Violet chuckled softly, teasing, "It probably tastes fine. But once you start drinking, don't hold back. We're husband and wife. What's a little indulgence?" I laughed, not at her joke, but at the lightheartedness and freedom in the air. It was a part of life I'd rarely experienced before. "You think too much," Violet said with a grin. "We're getting married soon. Just enjoy it." "You're right," I replied, then paused, looking into her eyes. For a moment, I felt something indescribable, a sense that everything in life happens for a reason. I didn't say anything more, just smiled faintly and turned away. We continued eating and chatting, but I couldn't help sensing a small gap between us, one that could be bridged with just a little effort. After dinner, Violet went to take a shower while I stayed behind, flipping through an old magazine. Yet, my mind refused to settle. Her scent lingered in the room, light and alluring. I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened and what I truly wanted. When Violet stepped out of the bathroom, her hair was still damp, flowing freely as the breeze gently played with it. Watching her, I felt as though my thoughts came to a halt. She was the only one who made these moments feel meaningful. "You smell nice. Let me rest while you dry your hair first," I said softly, feeling as though everything was returning to its natural course, a little peace, a little warmth. Violet smiled, looking at me. "You worry too much. You can't always analyze everything. Just let things flow naturally." Violet sat beside me, her long, damp hair still flowing loosely in the air. She stretched gently, her gaze directed out the window where the sunlight was gradually fading. A quiet stillness enveloped the room. I could sense her ease in every movement, yet there was a trace of hesitation lingering in her eyes. "Do you think we're really just friends? Or are we something else?" Violet suddenly asked, catching me off guard. She didn't look at me. Instead, she lowered her head, running her fingers through her hair as if seeking a moment of calm amidst the chaos of her thoughts. "We're people who can understand each other, Violet. You don't need to worry about things that aren't worth it," I replied, trying to steady my emotions, unwilling to let the tension in the air grow heavier. "Sometimes, though, Words and actions can make everything feel awkward, I added. Violet said nothing, remaining silent. Her lips curved into a faint smile, as if she understood what I meant but wasn't sure how to respond. She turned to look at me, her eyes still filled with uncertainty. Have you ever wondered if things could have been different? If we hadn't met here, would everything have been different? I stayed silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of her words. Those questions weren't easy to answer, but in situations like this, silence often becomes the best way to honor each other's feelings. Things can change, I finally said, but I believe we can always choose how to face them. Violet nodded slightly, then stood up and gave me a deep, searching look. I think I need some time to figure everything out, she said with a smile, but didn't elaborate further. It seemed that the turmoil within her had temporarily settled. I watched her walk away, a feeling I couldn't quite name stirring in my chest. Sometimes, silence becomes the clearest answer. In the end, every person must find their own answers, even if those answers don't turn out the way they'd hoped. Ethan and Violet, through their challenges and confusion, eventually understood that not everything can be resolved immediately. Sometimes it takes a little time and patience. Their relationship wasn't a perfect story, but its beauty lay in its sincerity and the moments of quiet reflection they shared. No matter which path they chose to follow, they had come to realize that true love isn't always about perfection. It's about acceptance, understanding, and change. That was the invaluable lesson they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. Thank you, dear audience, for listening to this story until the very end. And now, goodbye for now. See you again in the next story.